For the next section of our presentation here, we're going to be talking about tobacco and kind of how we see it today. Obviously, cigarettes are still the most heavily used tobacco product, but there are a lot of tobacco alternatives that have started to pick up in popularity pretty much over the last decade and have kind of started to be pushed and more heavily advertised more than more traditional tobacco products, be it, chewing tobacco, cigarettes, etc. A lot of these alternatives are being pushed as a safer alternative to a traditional cigarette. But again, as we all know, a lot of these things come with their own health concerns and their own risks. But I think part of the push for some of these alternative products coming onto the market is obviously all of the research that's come in to show how toxic smoking traditional cigarettes and consuming tobacco-based products can be for your health. Smoking cigarettes and exposure to those tobacco-based products have been shown to lead to cancer and a lot of other health concerns. They're exposing you to chemicals and heavy metals like formaldehyde and carbon monoxide when you're consuming these. So over the next couple slides, we're going to just touch base on a couple of these alternative products that are starting to come on the scene and probably some that we're all very familiar with. Our first one being these tobacco-free nicotine pouches. So these are actually marketed as being truly quote unquote tobacco-free because they actually don't use the traditional parts of the plant, be it like the stem or the leaves. They create what's called nicotine salts from the leaves. They extract them and then they put them together with an acid that then helps produce this white powder that is put into these little pouches. Now, it's not just the nicotine salts that are in with these pouches. It's like plant-based fibers and like sweeteners and a lot of other um, consumable alternatives that have, flavorings that lead to these little pouches that you then insert, to consume. But it's not something that you eat or chew. It just goes right there between your lip and your gum. Um, our next one that we're going to touch base with is another one that we're all probably very familiar with. We have e-cigarettes. Again, these are also nicotine salt based. E-cigarettes kind of came on the scene and started to be produced around 2007. Again, the same thing with the tobacco-free pouches. They contain those nicotine salts, which are said to have a stronger effect and create and can be absorbed faster than natural tobacco products. With e-cigarettes, these work by heating liquid that then gets created and turned into an aerosol that then can be inhaled. Again, there's still that push for all of these that show that they have, they're exposing you to a lot less toxins than what is, been known with more traditional based, combustible like tobacco-based products. The next last two of our slides are going to be touching base on just some of tobacco and its current numbers. So the way that we're looking at this is, and from a website that is actually from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. It's actually a really cool website because what it does is it allows you to zero in on a particular crop because again, that's exactly what tobacco is. It's a crop. It's part of the nightshade family, and you can see kind of how its production rates and where it is, the most popular and produced the most all over the world. So for all intents and purposes for here, I obviously zeroed in on tobacco over the world and kind of found it interesting that Asia and China are actually the most heavily uh, biggest producers of the plant itself. Um, in the past 3 years, China has actually held the highest production of unmanufactured tobacco compared to other countries like India, Brazil, Indonesia, and I found it surprising that the United States was actually last on that list. But according to the World Health Organization, in 2020 alone, over 22.3% of the world still use tobacco products. And it also still tobacco products, even with all of the research that comes out, it's still leading to more than 8 million deaths per year. Zeroing in a little bit more, we have the United States. And here in the United States, again, this just shows you kind of the production of how we're producing unmanufactured tobacco. You can see since starting in the 1990s all the way through 2020, you can just see that slow decline of how we are producing this. And obviously there isn't as much of a high need. And again, we result that back to just the research that's coming out of the negative effects of consuming tobacco. According to the CDC and the FDA, in 2021, about 46 million adults in the US still use some form of tobacco product. And just to narrow it in a little bit smaller, you can also see that in Pennsylvania, about 15.8% of adults still smoke. And other popular choices, obviously, again, being those kind of ones that we touch base on, e-cigarettes and smokeless tobacco. Now, these are kind of in more smaller quantities that they're popular, more like 4 and 5% of Pennsylvanians utilize these. Um, Overall, just touching base on tobacco, and you can see over the years it's gone from being a very popular plant to, again, after the research and things like that started coming out of the negative health effects, that slow decline in how not only the US but the rest of the world viewed and utilized tobacco.